Dave, what should homeowners expect today? What expectations should homeowners have when they buy a house?
From an investment point of view?
Yes, investment point of view.
Well, I think that one of the things that we've really struggled with as an economy and as a real estate market here in the last few years is just this issue of what people should expect from their housing. If you think about the last 10 years in housing, we got into a little bit of a bubbly mania kind of a mentality, and everybody talked about it, and there was a lot written about it in the press. So we know, of course, that nationwide housing prices were rising at 10 to 15 to 20% a year in some markets. Now that really wasn't true here, and that's important to note for what I want to say later. Here, maybe in our best year, our housing values went up 7 or 8%. And over the last 10 years, they've risen probably about 30% over time. And over the last 5 years, they've been very flat. So we escaped a lot of that. But nonetheless, we had that big inflation run up, and then, of course, as always has to happen, that came back down to earth. But what I think has been difficult about that is that what it's caused people to do is expect that somehow if we're not back to getting that 4 or 5 or 8 or 10% appreciation per year, that there's something wrong with housing. And I've seen articles written lately where people have been comparing that to the stock market, and they've been suggesting that you're only going to get 1%. You're only going to get inflation for housing. So it's a bad investment. Well, that's utterly wrong. And just to illustrate that, let me just give you this simple little analogy. You can do the math on this later, but I'll just say it this way just for brevity's sake. Let's take two hypothetical families. Let's take one family that buys a $200,000 house with $40,000 down. Then let's take another family that takes that $40,000, invests it in the stock market at 8%, and rents. All right? And let's just assume that the mortgage payment and the rent payment about cancel each other out. Guess who has more equity at the end of 5 years? The homeowner. The homeowner. Assuming that the house appreciates at 2% per year, the homeowner will have about $75,000 of equity. The renter will only have about $58,000. Yet people don't understand that. They seem to somehow think that we have to have this heavy appreciation. That's not true. And in fact, I'd make the point that housing works better when it appreciates more slowly. And the reason that is because when you don't have big fluctuations up and down, you have stability. And historically over time, if you track prices of housing relative to inflation, relative to their net rental value, they've generally tracked very closely. Generally speaking, housing over time has pretty much tracked the rate of inflation. And it's been a very solid, safe investment that people can count on. And that's what they should think about it going forward. What's interesting is if you look at that run-up that we started back at the turn of this last century, 2000, and look at where we are right now, we're right about back to where that inflation line would be. So housing values right now are very reasonable. We've got record low interest rates. We've got all these things going for us. We've got the best thing going. If people are looking for a safe place to put their money with a long-term view, I'd be willing to tell you that housing is probably their very best bet right now. Nobody knows it. It's a really interesting phenomenon.
But you also have to add in the other benefits of homeownership, right? I mean, serenity and neighborhoods and
that's right.
families, all these things.
Yeah, think about this first and foremost. Everybody lives somewhere.
Right.
I think we tend to forget that. We act as though how can housing not be a good investment when the fact of the matter is that all of it is in demand. Everybody has to live somewhere, and that demand is constant and growing. So the notion that housing is somehow going to be reduced in value would imply that it no longer has utility. Everybody pays rent to somebody. They either pay rent to themselves or they pay rent to a landlord. But either way, they're paying rent because they're living in that house and they're earning the utility of it. And I think that gets to your question, because the whole idea behind housing is that it's your place to live. And ultimately, what we counsel people to do is not focus so much on the investment value, even though that's what we've been talking about. Rather, what you should really be focusing on is why you want to live there, why you want to raise your family there. Is it a great neighborhood? Is it a great place to raise your kid? Is it a great place to live the kind of lifestyle that you want to live, to call your own? Right. And the beauty of it is that you do that, you own it for however long you own it, and over time your equity grows, your mortgage shrinks, and voila, suddenly you have a whole bunch of equity in that house, and you didn't have to do anything for it other than live there. And had you been a renter, that would be gone. So not only you get those investment benefits, but you also get the satisfaction of living in a place that you're going to live anyway. Right. So why not pay rent to yourself?
Plus the tax benefits, right?
Oh, sure. The tax benefits are still there. Now, you know, who knows? Tax benefits can always change. We don't tell people they should buy real estate because of the tax benefits. But the fact of the matter is that if you have a rent payment about equal to a housing payment, your housing payment is automatically lowered by the fact that you have some tax savings. And that house payment is fixed. If you buy with a fixed rate loan, that housing payment never goes up. Other than your property taxes will go up slowly over time, but the bulk of it, the mortgage payment, will never go up, and if you pay the mortgage off, it's gone.
Right.
And yet your rent is going to go up year after year after year. 5-10 years down the road, you'll be paying way more in interest. Housing payment will still be the same. All these reasons are compelling. And let's not forget that right now we have the lowest interest rates that we've ever had, making housing at today's prices the cheapest it will ever be. So you'll line all this up. And the sad part is that people, I think, through a lot of what's gone on here, they lost a little bit of faith in housing. Mm-hmm. And I think that's too bad. And that's really kind of the message that I want to get back to, is that fundamentally housing remains a bedrock for any family's financial future, as well as the place that they should raise their family. And if people buy it with that idea in mind and keep their expectations in line for what it should be, they're going to be very, very glad they did. They should not fear it, because it will reward them many times over under almost any scenario we see going forward.
Not to mention that this is a great time. We're just coming off a tax credit.
Right.
You know, demand is down.
Right.
So prices will reflect that. And I mean,
it's really
classic
interesting.
Market,
well, we talked about that in our last video.
Yes.
The fact that the vacuum that was created by the tax credit expiring has really been quite dramatic in this market. Probably more dramatic in this market than some others for reasons that are a little obscure to me, but there you have it. That means that the playing field is wide open for people that are looking for opportunity and value. But they should not fear it. I think the notion that if they buy now, they're going to somehow lose money over time. If they have a time frame that's of any distance at all, going out a few years, the likelihood that they'll lose money is very, very small. And the likelihood that they will be rewarded through that intrinsic rental value is very, very high.
Great. Thank you, Dave.
Thank you, Jim.